Hello and welcome to today's episode of Cyberspeak with InfoSec Institute. Today on the show is Pedram Amini, the creator of the Zero Day Initiative and the CTO of Inquest.net. He's presented a variety of research at security conferences such as Black Hat, DEF CON, RecCon, Echo Party, Microsoft Blue Hat, ShmooCon, TourCon, and Virus Bulletin, and he's taught numerous courses on reverse engineering. Pedram today is going to talk to us about the current state of email phishing attacks and how to prevent being tricked by them. Pedram, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So it seems like in the news that email phishing as an issue really kind of caught fire in the public imagination about 3 or 4 years ago. It had kind of a moment in terms of coverage with high-level attacks coming from simple phishing techniques like the Target credit card takeover and the security breaches around the interview. That movie. So how, if at all, have high-level phishing tactics changed since then, you think?
Yeah. First of all, I really want to define phishing overall. It seems like the umbrella that we have it falling under is phishing by way of malicious content delivery, phishing by way of credential harvesting. Generally, it seems like we're talking about business email compromise and malware carriers of that nature. So it's interesting that the news really kind of picked up in the past couple of years, because this has been a problem for well over 10 years.
Of course, yeah.
And and fundamentally, I have to say that much hasn't really changed by way of the attacker tactics. What we certainly have seen is improvements in the legwork leading up to these campaigns. Better creativity in the lures. You look at phishing campaigns from over a decade ago, and the fidelity was something to be left wanting. Like the English was broken, domains were poorly chosen. They really kind of stood out. Whereas now it's the same kind of tactics, but a lot more polish on it. And the sophistication in general has gone up.
Yeah. Do you think that these sort of high-level and well-reported attacks have managed to change the method of attack at all? I mean, you said that they're a little more subtle, but do you think in general that people are more careful now around suspicious emails after hearing about how one person who wanted a free pizza coupon compromised, 1.5 million credit card number?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it seems like there certainly is, when the scare happens, there's certainly an immediate increase in awareness. But as with anything else, I think over time, people just become lackadaisical, yeah. And the threat just becomes real again. I mean, and this is evident in just time after time again, high-profile case after high-profile case. You see these massive compromises based off of such a relatively simple tactic. So while there might be a lull at the moment, that's just going to be until the next major event happens. Like the DNC hack was shocking, in many ways, and I'm sure it was a gut check for future campaigns. But let's just give it time and see what happens. I think we'll see it again.
Right, and certainly there's so many different campaign offices that could be hit. We were talking to someone else about issues around the midterms, and they were saying like it's not just the DNC; it's every single local organization can all it takes is one person, and then
And again, the attack surface is so huge, not just in the sense of like technical attack surface, but the human attack surface. Where you've got new people joining every day, you've got people who are might be tired or overworked, like that increases the attack surface temporally. And, with time, the chance of success seems to be one. Like you're going to get it at one point or another.
You're wearing people down.
Exactly.
So how does one change that thinking that drives people to click suspicious links or give their information away in a moment of weakness? Like what's the mental mechanism that needs to change to bring this type of phishing attacks down?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. Certainly education is a portion of it. I think in the corporate sector, you've seen huge strides and improvement, and there's plenty of vendors out there who are trying to solve this problem. Personally, I think education only goes so far. I mean, it's hard to make the user be the end-all stopgap. A proper technology should get out of your way. At some point, regardless of what kind of measures you can put in place, you're going to have someone who's tired, someone who had enough inside information to make the attack or the lure look right. I love this this anecdotal story that social engineers give, where if you put on a suit and a hard hat and grab a clipboard, you're pretty much going to have all access to almost any environment. Yep. That same kind of thing applies with these email lures. If it looks right, if it sounds right, at some point it's probably going to fool somebody.
Yeah. So what What are some of the most unusual phishing attacks you've heard of that actually worked?
Yeah. It's unfortunately the most unusual and the ones that you think that wouldn't really work are the most common. It's amazing to me that there's an actual business behind sending fake invoices and these invoices actually getting paid. This kind of compromise, the fake invoice, the fake package delivery, the things that you really think would stand out in terms of this is suspect or abnormal. Those are apparently the most common. On the flip side, you see some really well thought out, well researched attacks. I have a colleague that I work with today, and he was telling me the story of how a previous firm that he was at, a large portion of the employees were successfully phished, and it's because the attackers took such great detail in replicating, even down to it was like an HR system and another system that was AS400 based. They mimicked the background colors. They were able to figure out who the IT guys were. So they really did a good job in pitching the entire story, then creating the urgency, launching the campaign, grabbing those credentials, and making kind of like a smash and grab.
And it worked out for them?
For the attackers it worked out. It didn't work out well for the company. It was a highly successful campaign.
Right. So, we think of phishing as a sort of constellation of different types of attacks, like you mentioned, invoices, but you can also, have misspelled URLs or similarly spelled URLs or unsafe attachments. Based on sort of being sort of out there right now, what are the most common types at the moment? Have any of the attack types that we think of sort of declined due to advances in patching upgrade or intrusion detection or anything like that?
Yeah, it's just, good question. I think it probably depends on the environment. I know that attachment, by way of just pure numbers, when you look at reports across the board from companies like Symantec or Verizon, it seems like the email attachment is the more common vector. But if your goal, for example, is to compromise someone's Gmail or someone's Dropbox or someone's DocuSign, chances are the better route to go there might be a URL that they click on and it looks similar. Maybe it uses the Unicode trick where they're using internationalized characters that at the end they look like, OneDrive.com, but really it's DR with some odd acrylic letter that looks like an I.
Yep.
So there's a number of different methods that they can use to kind of fool the user into thinking that something is legitimate. So it really depends. If your goal is to grab a credential, perhaps it's a URL. If your goal is to actually compromise a node on the inside of the enterprise, then probably you're going to go with some form of malicious attachment because your end result, your end goal is different. The environment also is going to play a factor. There are some institutions that if you're sending a URL from the outside, from the egress ingress, they simply remove it or they defang it so it's no longer clickable, or they put a huge warning on it.
Right.
So depending on the target environment, I would suspect that more advanced phisher would do some probing, some checking to see what kind of things would go through, kind of doing like a reconnaissance on the environment and the policies that they have set forth, and then choosing the angle that's going to actually get to the target user.
Now, so moving sort of one level more subtle to that, how do you educate people about things like hijacked emails? Because the usual line is that, there's usually a tell, there's a language barrier, there's an address that looks off. But how do you combat a situation where the message is actually coming from your boss's actual email because your boss has been legitimately compromised?
So you're saying, like, for example, his account was popped and someone actually logged into him and was sending an email.
Exactly.
It's going to be tough, right? Because that's even one level of increased trust that you have there. Perhaps there's some words that may stand out, or some words that he doesn't, use with regularity that strikes you as odd. Perhaps the time of day, might stand out. If there's any sense of urgency to the message, which seems to be a pretty common. I mean, it's a good sales tactic, right? It works for salesmen. It's going to work for phishing lords as well. In essence, they're trying to sell you, the user, on either opening the attachment or clicking on the URL. So if there's a sense of urgency to it, perhaps that would stand out rather. Is general recommendation. If, for example, I was working in an environment where I was working with financial people who were constantly being targeted, I would ask them to follow up with me. If it sounds odd, even a little bit, like let's get a second communication line out there. Hit me on IM. Give me a call. Delay it for a minute. Respond to it. Ask me to call you. Something that adds like a secondary level of communication. A better way technologically to remove these problems, and of course, anytime you add a security measure, it's taking away from usability and adding difficulty. But email signing. If there's a corporate-wide policy where everybody's email is signed, and therefore, even if the person's email is compromised, it's not going to have a valid signature because the attacker wouldn't know the signing key. And then you receive an unsigned email with some form of link or attachment or any kind of instructions to wire money or change some credentials, that would stand out immediately. Something to ignore or at least to follow up with.
Right. Are malicious macros still a going concern, or have patches and automatic upgrades and real-time malware detection and such made that less prevalent?
It's amazing. It's the gift that keeps on giving for attackers, right? Like this is decades old malware technique. We've been seeing this problem coming for years. As researchers from both an offensive and defensive perspective, we know that the client side is the last place that vulnerabilities are going to die, and the attack surface is just constantly changing. So yes, the short answer is malicious macros are most certainly a common attack vector. I think they will continue to be a common attack vector. A lot of security guys will, right off the bat say that you should just disable any kind of active content, like JavaScript and PDF, disabling Java in the browser, disabling macros for documents. And while that may be, it's an excellent device for environments where that's plausible, for the vast majority of enterprise environments, I'd venture to say that's just not feasible. And it's a complicated area. We focus not just static signature detection and writing, but we lean on machine learning or signature list capabilities detecting malicious macros and malicious active content in documents. And I'll tell you, there's some legitimate documents out there, especially in the spreadsheet world, that look pretty bad. Like, how do you tell the difference between a corporate required spreadsheet, which has a macro that's actually pulling local executable from like a UNC share, and it's valid, but from my perspective, it looks very malicious.
Yeah, it does.
So drawing the line in the sand between what's bad and what's good, whether you're looking at it from statically or dynamically, it's hard to do from a vendor perspective.
Yeah, and that seems like that's something that's going to have to be sort of dealt internally with enterprises in general, saying like, maybe find another way to generate that report without having that macro.
Or there's option of having signed macros, or you can have some form of watermark that that can be used to like whitelist. There's certainly ways of methods of sidestepping the issue or making life a little bit easier from the detection realm. The other thing you have is that the game is constantly changing. On the one hand, like this year, Microsoft, for example, has introduced new instrumentation capabilities for AV providers so that you can actually see inside macro execution. This allows AV vendors who have like a local desktop agent to do things like bypass any kind of like obfuscation. There's a myriad of ways where attackers can piece strings together. But in the end, what Microsoft is doing is providing a runtime layer that will show you the actual string that's being executed, for example. So, how nice, what a gift from Microsoft on that one front for defenders. But on the other hand, they just added JavaScript to Excel. Right. So it's a constantly changing dynamic attack surface, and new things are discovered every day. One of the big finds of last year, which it's an arguably older architectural exposure, was this Microsoft DDE, the Dynamic Data Exchange. I mean, very low, low technical aptitude. Like you can essentially point and click to create the exploit, just straight up command execution. And these techniques, they require some user interaction. Like especially with the DDE one, there's some tricks you can do to reduce the interaction from just opening and having to go through 2 or 3 dialogues to opening and going through one dialogue. But there's, in this day and age, there's some benefit to these interactive steps as well. In my past life, running vulnerability brokerage programs with Zero Day Initiative or with iDefense VCP, we put less value in vulnerabilities that required interaction from the user to actually successfully exploit. But now these things, with the advent of sandboxing technology sitting in the middle, dynamic execution, all these other things, having interaction required for an attacker or for a victim to fall, to get code exec from an attacker payload is actually beneficial. I've seen real world scenarios where the actual malware carrier is a document with another document inside of it. Like you have to find it and double click on it. In some cases, what they'll do is they'll make like an active pixel and draw this huge picture around it that says like, click here to activate this content. Inside there is another document. Inside there is another document. So you're talking about this like Russian nesting doll, these Matryoshka doll. And if you want to get to that payload, you got to open each and every single one of these things to get to that final piece. This is one of the things that we focus a lot of our efforts and time on is just that kind of attack, deep, peering deep into like this layer 7 plus is what I could call it.
I saw a stat on the number of internet users and said that it'll possibly triple to over 3 billion in the coming years. And a lot of those are obviously relative newcomers to the technology and thus extra susceptible to attack. So with that in mind, how are low-level attacks shifting in style these days at all to sort of accommodate that?
Low-level attacks like non-phishing style attacks, you mean?
Yeah, and just sort of attacks aimed at like new users and sort of very non-tech savvy people who are, just getting into the...
Yeah, I mean, there's two forms, right? One is like your more technical, like some kind of payload delivery. And in this case, a lot of low-tech things work. I'll give you a very simple example is, email somebody a virus, like a backdoor, your remote access Trojan. Probably they'll get blocked in transit. Email someone a compressed copy of that file, of that executable, and probably it'll also get blocked. Encrypt that archive and put the password in the email, describing to the user, hey, open this cool screensaver or whatnot, and the password for it is X. It will bypass every single network security product, probably get to that user's endpoint, and at least one of these myriad of users are going to, economies of scale, they're going to open it, put the password in, and launch this thing. It's very, very low value in terms of tech, but high success rate. On the other hand, more like the social engineering side of the front, I've seen attacks, and this happens. Everyone has heard of the IRS scam, where you get phone calls or emails or whatnot, scaring you into thinking that you owe some debt, and the way to get out of it is to pay up front fast. More interesting version of that I heard about recently is, a friend's grandmother had received contact from allegedly her grandson, who was in Mexico at the time, on vacation, didn't have access to a computer. But because of publicly available information on their social media, attackers saw this relationship, contacted her, the grandmother, pretending to be the grandson, saying, please wire money. I'm in trouble here down in Mexico. And because there's, the appropriate facts had been laid out, it made it very easy for her to kind of, fall victim to it, to think that it was real. Yeah,
that happened to my dad, actually. He got a call from someone saying that I was call and collect, and he needed to give his credit card, and it worked, unfortunately. In the other direction, considering the stakes, have there been any indication that C-suite executives are receiving better security awareness training? Are they changing tactics at all with whale hunting, spear phishing, that kind of thing?
It's hard to know exactly what behind the scenes is going on in terms of prevalence there. I mean, I imagine that a Fortune 100 CEO, if there was a successful campaign against them, probably not something that the team is going to be advertising. That said, there's unhandedly been an improvement in the corporate world, with consumers also improving, but a distant second in terms of like the rate of improvement. So I would say for sure the chances of getting getting a CEO to click on a malicious attachment or go through a malicious link is going to be lower. I mean, it's hard to get these guys contact information off the bat, getting them an email that will actually end up in their inbox, and then bypassing their security training. And at this stage, you've got some CEOs that have been in this game for a lot longer. They've seen these attacks for decades, and they're a lot more familiar with it.
So that suggests basically that if the stakes are high enough, that people can be successful educated, I suppose. Although
you say that, and then you look at the DNC, for example, it doesn't. It seems you can put things in place, but there's always going to be a weak link. And from the perspective of an attacker, they also have the benefit. It's not every day that someone's going specifically for, I want to attack Lockheed Martin to steal whatever, the F-35 plans. In general, they have a much bigger scope in terms of either corporate espionage or financial gain. So they can attack dozens of companies and find the one that has a softer outer shell. Right? Like it's essentially... the anecdote about you don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than the next person running away from the bear. Sure. I think that applies here quite well.
Yeah, Yeah. So how about remote workers and sort of issues of sort of offsite work? How do you ensure that their offsite computer hygiene is as strong as it is on site?
I mean, a lot of that I think is going to come down to policy. So, as an example, only allowing a corporate laptop to be on the, talking to corporate assets. That corporate laptop has to have a virtual private network. So even when they're at home, despite whatever nastiness might be going on around them, maybe they have compromised DNS servers, DNS hijack. Who knows what kind of state they're in, or coffee shop or hotel they're traveling to. So having dedicated hardware where the software is controlled and monitored by the security team. All their traffic is routed through perhaps the company's SOC, so they can monitor not just what's on the endpoint, but also what's going on in the comms. Seeing the whole picture really is important. That we always say that there's no silver bullet. It takes everything in the kitchen sink to find out what the badness that's going on. And so, monitoring on both endpoint and network is valuable.
How about with sort of the sort of rise of mobile use and so forth? I mean, there's so many sharing-based apps these days, and sort of social networking being tied into mobile use and so forth. Has mobile use shifted phishing in any way, or is it mostly using the sort of same techniques?
No, I think for sure it has. I mean, we still see that the number one is email attachment, but if you're going to be phishing someone on mobile, probably your route is going to be a URL to a fake-looking page. I would suspect when you're on the desktop, you have a lot more visibility. It's a lot easier to examine the certificate. I think some of the nuances or some of like the heuristical visible signs of a telltale phishing campaign might be a little bit more obvious when you look at it from a desktop browser than from a mobile browser. That said, though, mobile, iOS specifically, for example, that's one of the hardest to compromise systems in terms of like code execution. There's no difference whether you're iOS, Android, or desktop in the terms of clicking on the URL, being convinced that this fake DocuSign website is the actual DocuSign and entering your information. But when it comes down to actual code exec, you're talking about like $1 million capability for breaking into the iPhone. Whereas to get a capability to actually do code execute on my Mac, you're probably talking like $5,000. Like it's a huge scale difference in terms of like the economy of what it costs to do that. It's a walled garden. It's signed code. There's multiple security layers you have to break out of to get full compromise.
Is there? I mean, that sort of suggests that this is sort of an issue that could theoretically we could throw money at. And I mean, is it possible to sort of build up sort of PC or Android capabilities to the point that they are sort of as strong as OS in that regard?
Sure, but then it comes at a loss, right? So it's a trade-off. The more secure you make something, the less access you have to your own device. Right? So that's a common trade-off in religious war between like the guys who are like pro Android, pro iOS. For my mom, for example, the iPad is the perfect solution for her. That thing is not going to get infected. Granted, she's still going to be vulnerable to potential phishing attacks, but at least I don't have to worry about malware infecting her system. If I were to give her a desktop, forget about it. I'd never talk to her again. Every time I was home, I'd be working on her computer to clean.
Boy, that team viewer, man, I'll tell you, that's a lifesaver. What are some best practices?
Another favorite of some of these phishing guys, by the way.
Yeah.
They'll sure. Yeah. Like, hey, sir, can you go to your event viewer in Windows and you see those yellow marks? I can help you fix that. Install this team viewer. I'm such and such from Microsoft. Let me connect to your computer and fix it for you.
Just need your 4-digit. Yep.
Yeah.
So what are some best practices for ensuring that sort of outside vendors that you work with who need access to secure information are less likely to accidentally or intentionally compromise your network?
Privilege. I'd say privilege control, separation. Need to know, not exposing everything. Having limited access would be a key thing there. Potentially requiring them to use your own, like if you're going to be accessing this data, either you have to be on site, or this is the path you come down, or this is the gear you have to use. Monitoring it carefully, not just in terms of security monitoring, but even just like basic I/O monitoring could help you. Perhaps you give someone access to certain customer records and you monitor their patterns, and suddenly there's a huge spike in the number of records they're accessing. Rate limiting that, noticing it, bringing it up, having the audit trail. All these things would be key to protecting it. The true solution to all that, and technology that is to look for in the future, is what's known as homomorphic encryption, where you can actually query data but not get access to it. So if you are an HR company, for example, or a financial services company, you might be able to still gain access to the actual data you need without revealing the true source of the data, the full content of the data.
Is that something that's available now, or is that sort of a down the line?
It's a down the line kind of thing. It's more in the theoretical phase. There's some companies I think that are kind of scratching the surface and tickling. I'm sure there's some implementations out there, but that's going to be one of those big paradigm shifts. Is this homomorphic encryption and homomorphic database access? Well,
so let's talk about the future a little bit. Where do you see phishing in 5 to 10 years from now? How's it going to change, you think?
Probably assuming the same place. It looked the same 10 years ago. Why would we think it's going to look any different? 10 years. I'm sure we'll see continued polish. Maybe some more less of like the shotgun approach of phishing, where people are just spraying and hoping to get someone. Maybe some more long-term phishing, where you do a lot more reconnaissance. I hear this new term called pretexting, where there's no actual active payload. You're not getting either by malicious file or by malicious URL to collect credentials. It's more of a social engineering, espionage kind of thing, trying to kind of phishing just for information, maybe for financial gain, trying to figure out if a company's financials are going to look strong before an earnings call, for example. I can see some of that pretexting, as it's called, being used to set up your eventual delivery of something malicious, whether it is to steal credentials or to deliver malicious content.
If you had a magic gavel and you were able to enact some form of legislation aimed at reducing issues of security breaches and phishing, what would you do?
I mean, obviously, I would make them force the delivery of my product globally to everybody. Have to throw that capitalist thing in there. Sure,
that'll work.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, perhaps maybe, and this is a fun thing to brainstorm about, right?
Right.
Kind of like fun, like fireside chat over beers.
Yeah.
Maybe liability would be a place to start. Mm-hmm. When you have someone like Equifax, exposed more than half of Americans' social security numbers and whatnot, there's some kind of liability, some punitive damages would be good to have there. I don't know. It's a tough thing to legislate your way through, right? It's a tough thing to educate your way through. It's a tough thing to solve your way through. I mean, from an end user's perspective, I think there's immediate steps that you can take to make life more difficult. Things that you can do in terms of just general hygiene, using a password safe, ensuring that you're rotating your passwords, having two-factor. That's crucial. Even if someone's able to get your password, if there's a second factor associated with it, that's going to reduce the chances of successful compromise. Not just doing two-factor through your cell phone, which some people were able to social engineer the telecom companies into swinging your SMS messages to another target, and suddenly they're able to get your two factors from there too. So using something a third party like a YubiKey or some other token that's separate from your actual phone. These kind of things can help. Keeping credentials or rather monitoring sessions. Like if you log into Facebook or Google, all these providers now, they have the option to show you, here's the other places you're logged in from. Or here's a new device that just signed in. Are you sure you want to allow it? These kind of things I think are going to help harden the environment for the typical user. I think Apple's doing a great job with that, for example. Whenever I get a new device, and I'm signing in with it, one of my other devices gets a notification. So if that happened without me having something new, I know that something is up. I can, more quickly, stop the bleeding, change the password, rotate things around, pull data off, pull the plug, so to speak.
Yeah, education and two-factor are really kind of the way forward at this point, huh?
Yeah. And a lot of it has to be, vendor-driven. I mean, at the end of the day, you just can't expect this thing from a consumer. Who wants to deal with that? Right. The easier it is for the user, the better it's going to be. I think the machine learning will probably go a long way in this regard too. I mean, we're only scratching the surface of the kinds of things that it can do, and over time, it's just getting smarter and more tailored to the specific users. So when we, earlier we were talking about, for example, my boss's email got compromised. How do I know that if the email he sent is real or not? Well, because you get tired, because you don't have 1,000-point, dimensional vector in your mind for every single email that comes in, you might not. It might slip. With the machine, though, the machine learning aspects of it, the automated classification, based on time of day, the frequency, maybe where it came from, like small, minute heuristics, they add up to tell a big story. You know, it's fascinating. It's one of the research subjects that fascinates me the most, because in essence, what you can do is sit down and really think about like the fundamental tenets of a seemingly hard problem. And then once you put all those things down into a nice long list of features and feed it through these models, it's amazing the kind of stuff that comes out of it. You know, I'm continually impressed by the kinds of new malware, you know, not zero-day malware in the sense that they're exploiting zero-day vulnerability, but zero-day malware in the sense that there's no detections for it. No one's written like a hard signature for it. It's a new, it's a new sample. How often we're able to catch those things with, machine learning based signatures. It's neat to see, and I only think that's going to continue to improve.
That's great. And on that note, I think we are going to wrap up today. So, Pedram Amini, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the time.
And thank you all for listening and watching. If you enjoyed today's video, you can find many more on our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and type in InfoSec Institute, INFOSEC, to check out our collection of tutorials, interviews, and past webinars. If you'd rather have us in your ears during your workday, all of our videos are also available as audio podcasts. Please visit infosecinstitute.com/cyberspeak for the full list of episodes. If you'd like to qualify for a free pair of headphones with a class sign-up, podcast listeners can go to infosecinstitute.com/podcast to learn more. And if you'd like to try our free Security IQ package, which includes phishing simulators you can use to fake phish and then educate your colleagues and friends in the ways of security awareness, please visit infosecinstitute.com/security-IQ. Thanks once again to Pedram Amini, and thank you all for watching and listening. We'll speak to you next week.